We're still trying, I'm curious to see how this works this afternoon, because my intent or my agenda is to get them to do the bulk of the talking, and because I think they have more experience-based knowledge to share with you than me from my perspective, and so I'm really hoping to facilitate that. And Karen assured me that once she got started talking that it would just kind of continue. Yeah. So when we were on Zoom last Friday and so I said, here's what I had planned, and my plan was basically to think about. Well, first of all, I'm going to get through this. I have no disclosures. I assume you guys have nothing to disclose. Okay. To think about some explanatory models from my perspective as a psychologist about what it's like, explained in those models, to experience a new or progressing symptom, and how that facilitates either hopefully adaptive coping or maladaptive coping, and to think about ways to try to address some of that stuff practically. And what I'm really hoping is that we get a lot of input from them, again, as to based on their real world experience. But when we were talking, Karen said, the biggest issue is denial. And so I thought, how do you think about that from a psychological perspective to explain it so it makes sense in terms of how it comes about, instead of just saying, quit doing that. And so think about ways to process that so you can move forward. So I think of, to get to the explanation for denial, I'm going to use some rat models today. Does that offend anybody to talk about rat studies? Some people, I've given talks before about behavioral processes with rats, and they say, humans are not rats, and that is certainly true, but the behavioral processes actually are very similar. And rats might take offense to being compared to humans. I don't know. So this is basically, we're going to talk about this from the perspective of some sort of fear or other negative emotion-based response. So when you are in a situation that elicits a great deal of fear in response to, in this case, learning of a diagnosis, or experiencing yourself firsthand, or seeing a loved one experience a new or progressive symptom, there's this cascade of stuff that goes on that's all basically negative. Your brain, which is doing a lot of stuff simultaneously, one of the things it does is watch for perceived threat and address that threat by producing this cascade of physiological responses. And when it sees this sort of stuff, it jumps into high gear. So your amygdala, which is putting emotional valence on the stuff that's going around you, and the limbic system, which is responding to everything that's going on there, is pushing your system to have this incredibly strong negative physiological arousal. And so what happens? Well, so I'm going to be referring to this model referred to as contingencies of reinforcement, where you think about setting events, which are external or internal stuff that's going on, or motivating operations, if you will, and then the behavior itself, and then what comes from that, the consequences. So in this case, with this fear-based response, let's think about a rat in an operant chamber. So operant chambers, these are just little grids that are boxes that have, they're not very well apportioned. There's not a lot going on there. There are no pictures on the wall and so forth, unless that's part of a study. So it's just a bare wall device that maybe has a little light bulb somewhere, but has a bar to press, and has a grid that is metal through which electrical charges can be processed, if that's part of the study. And so one of the basic things you look at with grids like this is just rate of responding, and that is with the bar press. And that's the more common one. I was thinking, as I was getting ready for this talk, one of my professors in graduate school decided that rate of responding was interesting, but it was not the only thing there was to thinking about behavior. So he added a process of how much pressure it took to produce a response. So he had an electromagnetic sort of thing where you could up it to make it more, you had to have a stronger bar press to get a reward and so forth. I always thought of his mice and his rats as really well built really good upper developed deltoids and so forth. Anyway, so in this case, you put a rat on a grid and you turn the electricity on, so there is a noxious electric charge on the grid. So what does a rat do in that case? Well, they are not really happy with this event, I can tell you that. And so they do all kind of stuff. They jump around, they jump up because they're jumping away from the shock. They may roll over, and if they have a really thick coat of fur, then that may insulate them enough so they don't get shocked. They void because they are very uncomfortable. And sooner or later, if there is some way for them to get out of this section of the grid, like there's a hurdle to jump and so forth, invariably they will jump that. And if they find some way to escape, then the immediate consequence for them is relief. Okay? So this is the paradigm that describes why most of us do what we do in terms of escaping stuff we don't like. We're in a situation that is noxious for us. We do all kinds of stuff. We may not void like rats do, but we do all kind of stuff. And then eventually we find some way to get out, planned or not, to get out of the situation, and then we get relief. So here is one, but not, I purposely didn't put everything I could think of, but here's one from a patient perspective. So let's say you're an HD patient and suddenly you have trouble using a fork or a spoon the way you could last week. And so that's frustrating. That is, again, cascade of negative emotional responses producing some sort of fear or anger. So similar to the rat who's on the electric grid, what do you suppose the response to that, among other things, might be? Well, okay. In the interest of your time, you might throw the plate. You might complain about the food being no good. You might argue with the cook. You're going to do something you're not going to say, oh, this is horrible, I can't use this, there's something going on with my system, that would be a nice direct, let me deal with this. These are all, I'm not dealing with this kind of responses. And the result for that, the consequence for that, is relief. I don't have to deal with the difficulty of eating. Now, this is short-sighted kind of problem solving. You know, most of us eat every day. You're going to have to eat sometime later that day. You're going to have to deal with this later. But for right now, I'm not having to deal with that. And a lot of our maladaptive, this is how you can begin to think about, is my response adaptive or maladaptive? Am I just getting out of the situation I'm going to have to deal with again later on? If not today, then tomorrow or next week, and am I going to be better prepared for dealing with this? And is this really a good solution? In this case, this is really not a good solution. But think about, let me back up for a second because I don't jump. So think about, and this is where you may choose to share stuff, other panel members, hint, hint, some instance of when you experienced something and how you responded to it, if it fits in that, and even if it doesn't fit in that. And you've got a microphone between you.
I was going to let you go first.
So let me just let you know that we're going to also, in a second, jump to the caregiver response to this as well. So you're on the hook as well.
I know I'm on the hook, but you're in the hot seat right now.
I know. Okay, let's see.
And we have a pool going on for the person who responds the most often tonight gets a reward that we have yet to figure out. So, so this is an audience thing too, so you are welcome to
We
participate
have
in this.
shocks underneath your seats.
Okay, we weren't going to tell them.
You have to give a response.
That's right.
Oh, goodness, I know.
While you're thinking, can you think of an instance of either you as individual, or do you mind sharing something? But, sure.
So wait, we have to do
Yeah.
this for our virtual audience.
This is like a real talk show where we have a microphone rotating around.
So I'm a caregiver, and my wife has advanced stage of dementia. So when she has bowel issues, she's constipated or whatever, she can't communicate well, so she starts acting out with moving around, taking her clothes off, being anxious, wanting to take a nap. So really, and what I have found is if tone is very not good, like for me or from the caregiver, it makes matters worse.
Okay.
So how do you sort of adapt and redirect and all that kind of stuff, and obviously deal with it with medication, and you could, after a while as a caregiver, it's like a sixth sense, you know things are coming.
Thank you. And
Might as well. What do we do?
Oh, I have an example relating to the eating one. He will use his hands instead of forks or spoons,
Okay.
which is fine sometimes.
It's better that way. Yeah. It tastes better that way.
My 18-month-old
And so,
uses her
mean,
hands all the time.
For what it's worth, I mean, I wouldn't refer to that as a maladaptive response. I mean, it's your house, and so you may have a thing about people using you. As background, I was raised by a surgeon, so if a utensil dropped to the floor that had to go be sterilized before you could use it, you couldn't just wipe it off. But in some houses, eating with your hand, I mean, we eat lots of stuff, chicken, et cetera, so if it works.
Yeah, well, for my sister, yeah, I mean, if she's frustrated and she can't communicate and they're trying to feed her, and she gets really mad and throws everything on the floor. I mean, because she wants to talk, but because she can't communicate, and I don't know what she needs, she's throwing that food on the floor. So that's the food's on the floor, but it's not because she's not eating it, but it's just her way. I got to find a way to communicate with her. So I now try to go up before she gets her food, and I feed her. And that way I know she's getting fed right, and she's not getting cranky. Because, they've called the police on her and the ambulance, because they don't want to handle her outburst. But it's just that she can't talk.
In response to you using your hands, my husband does. If we can find finger foods, just to prolong his independence. He has weighted silverware that we use that I stupidly forgot in Mississippi. So when you see us around, if I'm feeding him, it's because it's not, the silverware that's great for all of us that don't have Huntington's isn't great for someone with Huntington's. So that weight and that thickness helps. But we do tend to stick with hamburgers, and we'll use a burger buddy and fries and things that he can eat with his hands just to prolong his own independence and to make him feel like he's doing for himself, because he was a very, very independent man before Huntington's got in the way.
And just thinking practically, and I don't know if there are any occupational therapists in the room, but this is where an OT consultation would be potentially incredibly helpful, because they are thinking about adaptive devices like weighted things or larger grips and so forth to help with feeding when somebody has some difficulty with their dexterity.
Yeah, they have weighted plates and cups, and also they have that spoon and fork that you can get that moves like that. And yeah, and
We're gadget people. We love gadgets.
that is amazing, because then you can put it in your hand. It doesn't matter where your hand is; the top of the fork is up, and then.
You do have to be careful with the spoon, the attachment, because it's held together by a magnet. And my husband's bad about going to take it out. The spoon stays in, but the handle comes out. So just be careful. But it's a great utensil, and we love it. It's just we have to be careful of how Nathan uses it. Sorry.
Oh, no, this
You
is.
wanted us to take over.
You just have to microphone. Share the microphone.
Oh,
Like when you talk. It's fine now.
I'm good.
Okay.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
Nope.
No, but please don't apologize for doing exactly what I wanted you to do. I'm trying to think about how to reward that so it continues. That's exactly what I want. So shifting gears from patient-centered perspective to caregiver perspective, I'd like for you to think about, from your perspective, what's something you've seen, if you don't mind sharing, thinking about this fear response and escaping from it. What's something you've seen that frustrated you and is like, I don't want to deal with this?
Everything HD?
Okay. Good response.
No, seriously. Sometimes it can get overwhelming. And I have to stop and think, if it's overwhelming for me, how overwhelming is it for Nathan who has the disease? So I have to stop and put myself in that perspective of, I've got to cut up his food. I can't eat because I've got to do his. But how frustrating is it for him to not be able to do it for himself. And that's, I mean, because Nathan, before HD, like I said, very independent, was a diesel mechanic, and just did everything for everyone. The type of guy, I mean, I literally have seen my husband when we were dating, we were sitting in Applebee's, and I've seen him jump a fence to go chase down a homeless veteran to give him the last $60 in cash that he had on him. That's just that type of person that Nathan is. So it really sucks that this independence of his that he had has been slowly taken away by Huntington's. But in a different, crazy, weird way that I'm going totally off track with, in a sense, I think Huntington's kind of brought us a little closer together, because we've had to learn things about each other that most married couples don't. You know, I mean, and when, you know, our joke, and we joke a lot. By the way, the last panel, I failed to mention this. I'm easy to cry sometimes. So, and especially if she asks questions, I'm going to cry. And two, we try to do everything with humor. Dark humor is our friend, and we use it a lot. But, you know, we kind of joke and say things like, you know, in sicker, you know, in the vows for richer, for poorer, and sicker in health, I've told him repeatedly, you know, we've done sicker and we've done poorer. I need wealth and health. So, just like I said, we do dark humor. And, you know, just because it bothers him, I know it does, because I know my husband, about not being able to take care of his family the way he feels a husband and a father should. But he while he can still do things, you know, we let him go. We let him do whatever he wants. If you want whatever he wants to eat, we get, and just to keep as much normalcy and as much independence as we can. You said talk.
It's good.
I did, and thank you. Here I am presenting a maladaptive model about stuff, and here you gave, among other things, two really good examples of adapt. Well, okay, points off for the microphone. We probably need another stand for that one, because I don't think it's going to sit on that surface.
Yeah, if I do that. Here, I'll just hold it until you want it.
Two really good examples of adaptive coping. One is you're really frustrated, and one of the things you do to cope is to think about his perspective taking, thinking about what they're going through as a way to help you deal with what you're going through, which is just a wonderful thing to do. Some people never learn that. Some people learn it at an early age. Sounds like you just have mastered that. And the other is dark humor like that is okay. It is a way to just put it all out there and deal with it as a little bit of humor, so you can kind of deal with it in doses. So those are two, my opinion, for what it's worth, those are two really good examples of adapting in a productive way to deal with something that's very difficult. Can you think of other examples from a caregiver perspective of reactions and difficulty? Or you guys, so if I'm talking to a room of really good adaptive people, then I need to finish quickly and we'll find somebody else to come talk about stuff. Or I'll just turn it over to you guys and you can share some more of your tips, which would be fine with me. All right, so assuming that there still is some concern about the escape stuff, there are lots of different examples of escape behavior, right? So these are things that are short, quick, simple acts of behavior all the way to long chains of events. And this is not an exhaustive list, but this is changing the subject because I don't want to deal with it. It's quickly getting involved in some other task. I'm just too busy right now, go away. It's simply refusing to answer. This is something that my grandkids, especially one of them, has mastered, and it's the most maddening thing if you're a parent or a grandparent, because when they figure out at a young age, they really can't physically make me talk if I don't want to. They are in complete control, and so that passive sort of escape, if you will, is really, really difficult. It's not impossible to get around, but it's really difficult to get around. And then arguing about something else. So one of the best ways as a maladaptive way of coping with stuff is you can, oh yeah, but you did this kind of thing to get it off on the other person, then they can argue. Or if you're in a triad of people and you're the one in the hot seat, you just get them talking about something they have unresolved between the two of them. I'm going through a lot of stuff with my family, resolving some stuff in the estate, and it's amazing to me watching the pathology that me and the rest of my siblings have, a lot of stuff from childhood that we hadn't dealt with and so forth. And so it's, you know, it's become funny. We're now all we're at this stage where we're kind of laughing about most of it. My brother said at one point, I really hate going through all this with a psychologist. And I've made him feel miserable about it, so, by pointing out, here's the thing, but actually I've done just as bad as him. All right, so those are simple things. Change the subject, argue about something, point something out. But there are other things that are really much more maladaptive that are larger concerns. Substance use, substance abuse would be a perpetual way of dealing with something that you don't want to deal with. Self-harm and other kind of high-risk behaviors as ways to just escape and avoid dealing with this sort of stuff. But again, we got examples of good coping up here, so this is not us. So why does this behavior persist? This is back to the issue of denial. So there's escape behavior, which is in the midst of noxious stimuli, I'm getting the heck out of here. And then there's a second level of that. It's like a two-stage theory. This is a classic theory in anxiety where, well, and I don't want to present it, but I'll present it here and then discuss it. So in the traditional model that I put up before, and it's back up here again, the rat's on the grid, it becomes electrified, they jump around, they finally escape, they get relief, right? Well, think about this as a second level of that task. The rat's on the grid, and I said there might be a little light bulb in that operant chamber, and so you turn the light bulb on about 5 seconds before, then you electrify the grid, and early on, the light bulb has no meaning to the rat. You don't really think about meaning to rats, but there is no change in their behavior based on the light bulb is a better way to say it. But after a couple of episodes of this, the light bulb starts to get a response so that you can then, you can disconnect if you want to the electric grid and just turn the light bulb on, and the light bulb is sufficient to elicit the escape behavior. So that's a second level, right? And light bulbs, as far as I know, have never really, how to say that, they've never really harmed anybody. You should not swallow them. That's not a good thing, but just turning them on and off doesn't really harm anybody. Unless you're two little kids at home and one doesn't want the light on and the other one's turning it on. That's when it becomes more of a problem. But in this case, all that happens is that the rat, if you want to say it this way, learns to avoid. Learn is a mentalistic term, which really is not precise. But we also say, how many of you say the sun rises and sets, right? Does the sun really rise and set? No, but it's a convention and it's just a lot easier. So the rat so-called learns to avoid. Now, is avoidant behavior, which by the way is the behavioral model for denial, this is an audience and panel participation. Is denial always a bad thing? No, I heard one no, and several more. Okay, so when is denial, so what is the useful or functional utility of denial?
I would say I don't want any denial. I would say I don't want any denial. I don't.
Okay.
I think that not necessarily that it's denial, it's perseverance is what I would kind of gear it towards, if that makes sense. I don't know if anything I'm saying makes sense, but instead of we don't deny Nathan has Huntington's, but we don't avoid it, but we do try to live past it. We don't, Nathan has Huntington's doesn't have Nathan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that would be avoidant behavior, but that's just a way that we get through and we get by.
Okay. Now, the
And
people.
like, oh yeah, well, my sister would just get really mad when she didn't want to do something, and I've got two sisters with Huntington's, but she would go in and lock herself in the room and not come out for like 12 hours, and that's not really denial or avoidance, but that is just her way of just, okay, I gotta coping mechanism.
So that's so that you just answered the issue, I think. So denial sometimes, unless it's the thing that perpetuates and gets in the way of healthcare choices and so forth, sometimes you just need your own time to process stuff, and you can't process it on somebody else's time frame. And I think we're all like that. You get really bad news of one sort or another, and it's like, okay, I'll deal with that later. And sometimes that, if that I'll deal with it later is 5 years from now, okay, that's not healthy. That's an extreme. But if you just need a little time and let it kind of sink in and process it one bit at a time, that's a reasonably healthy thing to do, or it potentially can be. So let's see, what was I? All right, so the main issue here is that the longer you engage in avoidant behavior, you can get better at avoidant behavior, all right? So it's like anything else, the more you practice, the better you get at it. And so they are harder to unlearn. It's really very hard to get you can't just, can't we just get somebody to understand insight? Now, I know rats can't, as far as I know, communicate. You can't tell a rat, look, don't worry about the light bulb anymore. It's not a big deal. I'm going to put you in this grid and just, relax and press the bar and get some food. You have to set up a specific model for them to break the connection between the light bulb and their the mindset, if you will. I know that's also inaccurate, that something bad is going to happen. So avoidant behaviors, denial, if you will, are problematic if they affect healthcare, if they affect relationships. That's really two of the ways to tell when it is becoming more problematic. So again, the more you practice avoidance and not shifting finally to deal with stuff, you get better at. So the avoidance generalizes. You get better at avoiding more things if you're not careful. So what is it you're supposed to do about that? Now, so here's the situation. So if you're in that situation where something elicits that fear response, the behavior that you should generate to get past the avoidant behavior is to stay in the moment, don't act, don't respond, especially with some sort of avoidant behavior. And what do you suppose the immediate consequence of that is? Well, so if I'm going to deal with this stuff that I have avoided dealing with for days, weeks, or months. I'm going to sit in this stuff and not leave, not get mad, not go to something else, and so forth. What do you think? What do you? I'm sorry. Let me ask. I'm not asking a full question, and here I'm asking a full question. What do you think your initial physical, emotional response is going to be to that? Honestly. If you've ever avoided something because you just didn't want to face it because it was really bad news, and you finally said, okay, and your immediate response to that is probably scream. Okay, so it hurts. This is not pleasant. If you've been really avoiding something for a while and you finally decide to deal with it, all that stuff that you were working so hard to avoid. Now, my father used to tell me, all that stuff that you're running from, when you finally face it, it's going to get better. But I went back later on after I'd been in graduate school for a while and said, it's not really going to be better right away. According to the literature, it's going to be worse, and then it'll get better. He said, well, whatever. So you have to figure out some way. It's going to be a negative situation, and it's going to be a negative situation that will probably escalate. So let me think about another example. I treat some patients who have, this is totally unrelated to HD, I apologize, but PTSD is similar in terms of the fear response. There is some sort of traumatic event, and so certain cues get imprinted in your brain as things that are fear-eliciting sort of stimuli, and long after the situation is gone, isolated cues will elicit all this stuff and produce this escape and avoidance sort of stuff. And so when you tell these individuals who are seeking help finally, what we're going to do? We're going to actually relive that event in a very systematic fashion, and it's going to be really painful. But I'm going to help you figure out some ways to tolerate it, because the longer you tolerate it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and then it's going to get better. It'll ebb, it'll peak, and then it'll begin to drop. But that's a really difficult thing to do. Conceptually, it makes sense. Experientially, it's really difficult to sit in there long enough to let all this stuff go like a wave or whatever, and then begin to deal with it. But that's what happens. So This is really challenging, and it's really challenging to stay in that moment without, but you have to, this is one of those things, kind of like your perspective taking is a way to stay in the moment, thinking, trying to tell yourself this is going to pay off after a while. So it does help. So there are some therapeutic steps. One is that getting some professional help from somebody to deal with some of this escape and avoidant behavior. Not that everybody has to see a psychologist or a social worker who's going through this, but professional resources who spend a lot of time thinking about this process and who are really well aware after talking to you of what you're going through and can help with the process can make this go a lot more smoothly. Comment on that?
I was going to say something and I forgot it.
So you promised me that you were going to disagree with me a lot. Well, I have a question for you, so if you don't mind. Has any external source, somebody from HDSA, a friend who's going through a similar thing, a professional, has anybody helped kind of bridge the gap in dealing with some of the stuff you have to deal with?
Yes, well, yeah, all the time.
Okay.
I call the social worker a lot, you know, when I stressed out at work, when everybody was yelling at me, and I was very frustrated, and I thought they were talking about me because they were talking in Spanish, and I couldn't understand them, so I was really freaking out. I mean, really, really bad. I mean, this is why I went on disability, because I was like, I thought they were really talking about me because that's what my brain thought, that I you know, my Huntington's was making me do bad things, and they were talking about me.
In our case, you know, we just kind of take it day by day, and how, you know, we let Nathan take the lead on it. But there have been times that we've had to call Dr. Wong or Dr. Sung or their assistants to help with, like, for example, anxiety. Nathan had some anxiety that, you know, he would worry about, and things like going places without me. He knew that I would handle everything, and that I would take care of him, and that I would make sure he did not get lost or anything like that. And he got to a point for a bit there that he didn't want to go anywhere with anyone. I used this example in the last session because my sister-in-law was taking him and my stepdaughter and niece to a football game. And he had this fear of that his own sister wasn't going to watch out for him like I would. And then we realized that he had a lot of anxiety, so we had to call. Actually, I think Dr. Wong prescribed one, and Dr. Sung prescribed something to help him with his anxiety. So I think that's along the lines of what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. And well, exactly. Yes, thank you. So here are some other. These are suggested therapeutic steps for the sake of discussion for the initial pivot where when you decide I'm going to sit in the moment and begin to kind of figure this stuff out. And again, you guys are past this, and maybe everybody in the audience is past this, but you want to think about some kind of self-focused, distress-tolerating activity. Doesn't that sound? That sounds like a real psychological process, and I apologize for that. But these things are really idiosyncratic. That is, what works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. You need to think about some ways, and this is, you can think about your own history. What in the past, when I have been really scared, what has helped me to just deal with this stuff, not to process it, not to solve it, but just to deal with it, so I then can come back and begin to solve it. And I always think about when I was a little kid in Shreveport. I was one of 4 kids, and second of 4, and there really is not a lot of literature on birth order meaning a whole lot, but maybe it does mean some. But I was really convinced that I had to do really well in school, which was following my older brother, who didn't really seem to be as interested in school anyway. I would get really anxious about doing well, and my mother finally said one night, here's what you do. When you get really anxious about that math or English or whatever you're doing, take a break, go out and walk around a little bit, take a hot bath. And this was in the first grade. And so I would judiciously do all those things. It's probably her fault that I'm a psychologist. Because it worked. Get away from this for a while, purposely do something else to distract yourself and calm yourself down. Hot bath actually promotes some kind of calming. So that has always worked for me. But again, some other people, that may not be the issue. Some kind of slow, deep breathing process might be helpful. Calming imagery. So by calming imagery, I think I'm going to imagine someplace that I'd really like to be. And it's not just, I wish I was there, but it is taking one sense at a time, as your tactile sense and visual sense and so forth, and try to imagine. And the example I usually use is being on a beach. So tell me everything you'd see on the beach, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the smell of the salt air, getting all your senses involved. And it's a really simple but useful technique to kind of get you away from all this stuff for a few minutes. And it can be, that's not comforting for everyone, but it can be very comforting. Mindfulness activities and even contemplative prayer of some sort, repetitious prayer of some sort can be very calming and focused. I was raised Methodist and Presbyterian. I married a Catholic. Catholics have cornered the market on repetitive prayers, carry around beads that remind you of which prayer to say at which decade and so forth. And I'm still trying to master some of those. Anyway, and there's also, here's another technique. Any of you familiar with the technique of diffusing? Okay, so this is a concept that's been around for a while. It is now part of ACT therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is kind of caught on in the last number of years, which I think is really useful and has a lot of empirical support for it. So I don't want to sound critical, but one of my graduate students a couple of years ago said, you notice that techniques in psychological therapy get repackaged every 10 years or so. So I think ACT therapy is really good, but there's a lot of stuff in there that's been there in other versions and other therapies before. So diffusing technique is a simple, we're actually going to do an experiment or a demonstration, not an experiment, and there is no shock. Do we have the shocks turned on for them now?
Karen was supposed to take care of that before it started.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and the process is simply this, that if there's some thought, image, emotion that is really troubling for you, that instead of avoiding it, if you actually force yourself to engage in a repetitious interaction with that, it'll begin to kind of lose its value. It diffuses its value. So as a simple, really stupid example, one image, think about a food or a beverage that you really like. This morning I used the example of chocolate pudding. I'm not going to use that again because there were not enough chocolate pudding consumers in the audience. But maybe when you were a kid and you had a long day and you get supper and you get a nice glass of ice cold milk, which you might also associate with like warm chocolate chip cookies and so forth. So I want you to get that image of everything every association you have with ice cold milk, and just sort of enjoy that imagery for a second, all right? And tell me when you're there. Tell me when you can really, literally experience that. I'm in no hurry. You guys too?
Sorry, I have water.
Okay.
I've got cookies too. I've got cookies too.
Okay. Oh, good for you. Okay. All right. Now, here's what you do. And you can do this silently. You don't have to say it. Although this would be interesting for the video, if everybody were to say the word milk out loud 100 times and then see what the audience thinks of that when they watch this later on. But just say it silently, just literally. But you have to honestly do this. You have to say that word repetitively. Milk, 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 milk. Try to do it 100 times. Count that. Without falling asleep, by the way. In the afternoon, that's difficult. Got to be around 30 words by now, maybe 40. Keep going. The rapid. Anybody close to 100 yet? You can't- huh?
Karen's definitely there.
All right,
I
so
was watching your mouth.
what is your association with the word milk right now? Is it the same as it was when you started that exercise? Okay, because so a lot of times when I watch somebody who does a much better job of presenting that than me, the people in the audience will say, after a while, those syllables got to where it didn't really mean anything. Milk is like, is that a word anymore? And so that is the technique of diffusing. And it sounds really simple, but it is just the repetitious experience of that one thing to just for a second kind of push it out. Now, it'll come back. I mean, you have not, I have not, this is not hypnosis, right? I have not, your association with ice cold milk is not gone forever. Don't worry about that. It'll come back, but it temporarily gets kind of pushed aside. Something about the brain process and satiation and so forth and repetition where the response drops like that. So anyway, that is a technique for dealing with a very difficult situation that you're trying not to deal with, and it just gives you a little time to process so you can move on. Music, for a lot of people, is very comforting. For some people, it's not at all. But it's listening, but also producing, sometimes playing your own music, even if you're terrible. So don't play for an audience, play for yourself. But the engagement in trying to produce chords, produce notes, whatever, can be really entertaining and distancing for a while from what you're dealing with. Social interaction can be very important. I haven't looked at the study in years. I'm sure that my memory of the study is distorted from what it was, but there was a really interesting study about facing fears in kindergarten kids. And so they took this group of kids and they put them, and this is the terrible sort of stuff that psychologists do, they try to terrify little kindergarten kids, but they put them in a situation where they were measuring whether or not they would face and approach something that was potentially scary for a kindergartner. And for part of the group, they basically just gave them those instructions, and for part of the group, they said, and by the way, there's somebody on the other side of that screen who knows what's going on, and if anything is the least bit threatening, they're going to come in and help you out, so don't worry. And for the two groups were different in terms of their approach to the issue. The group that thought, there's somebody who's got my back, essentially were more likely to approach and deal with things than the group who didn't. The group who didn't, of course, they called DHS and turned in the psychologist for, threatening them. They actually didn't do that. Yes.
Just a quick comment on that, because I'm thinking of these two wonderful, wonderful ladies that are sitting up here. I think both of them have very intentionally, Karen for a little longer, just because you haven't been in the HD game for that long, Heather, have intentionally surrounded themselves with social interactions and the community to help them, right? So they know the community has their back. Karen's been doing this for how long? 30 years? 30 years. Walks and events and conventions. I think everyone who's come to convention this year and in years past, right? You surround yourself with the community. And again, I say intentionally, I've heard Heather's story, Nathan's story probably a gazillion times at this point. And she always mentions, right, the minute that they got the diagnosis, she started a Facebook group. And I'm not going to tell your story for you, but I think you guys can speak to that of, it's HD is something that's scary, and part of your coping mechanism is to surround yourselves with the community. And I'm going to be quiet now and let you talk about it.
I'm going to tag on that. When we did get Nathan's diagnosis, it took us, we told our family and friends, but as far as social media, we would do things to try to support for, we would share HDSA stuff. We would share stuff about HD, but we never said why. Just because it took us that year to process it and to deal with it. And we just, both of us had to deal with it in our own way. Excuse me. But once that year went, once we came to the agreement that we were both ready to discuss it, boy, you couldn't get us to shut up. And if you don't believe me, ask those two people over there. Ask this one here. But yeah, it's the saying, it takes a village and it takes a community. And that's what we've done. Whether it's our community lives in the northern United States, the eastern, the western, the southern with us. I mean, we one thing about it, the Huntington's family is a huge family, and that's what, you know, we're not friends, we're family. So I don't know if you, I'm sure you want to tag on that too.
Hello. Well, you know, I try to be so positive, right? But, all right, it doesn't matter what medicine I take or what I do. If someone touches my car windows, I flip out. I would, like, kill them. I mean, that's what I want to do, even now. Even now when I am nice and happy, but that one little thing still flips me. Yeah, boom. I'm like, because like I say in my brain says, those are windows that are supposed to see through. Why do I want a fingerprint on them? I am OCD about that, and my shower, everything in the shower, the labels have to be lined up. Someone else turns them, someone helped me clean the other day, they moved them, freaked me out. And those are things I don't think I'm ever going to get better at, but like, you guys are the first people to hear it in a long time about the car windows. My family knows.
It's good to know.
But yeah, now I try to go, okay, Karen, get chiller. And then there's also this, my sisters are both in denial that they have Huntington's. So they don't think they have any symptoms or their outbursts or anything. And there is a thing called this organic denial that somehow your brain, part of your brain, loses the part that tells you that you have Huntington's, and they're never going to get better. And I have to deal with that, you know.
No, I don't want to touch that. How about fingerprints on the microphone? Does that bother you? Because
Just the windows.
okay. Now, I can tell you, not that you, so there is a way to get over the irritation you feel with the fingerprints on the windows. It's referred to as exposure and response prevention, not shock treatment. But there are methods. We're all going to go, is your car parked here? Because we're all going to go put grimy fingerprints on it.
Yeah, you guys are my family now because I told you guys.
Where did you get your t-shirt?
I made it.
Very cool.
Like, on the back, I'm going to have to put, stay away from my windows. Thank you.
Wait, I got
That-
something to say. No, behind. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Ooh, where?
So we're still early on, and Robin is still very independent. He drives everywhere. He doesn't work anymore, but he drives himself. He takes care of himself. He's very, very independent still. But one of our biggest looming fears is that change that will happen eventually. And his biggest fear is losing the independence and losing the ability to drive, losing the ability to care for himself. Those are two of the biggest ones. There are some little things that he's lost already, like the handwriting, and so I fill out forms for him now. But those are like little things. It's those big looming ones out there that are the really scariest ones. And then for me, one of the biggest fears of the loss of independence is my ability to cope with that. I'm not always a very patient person, so I worry that I won't deal with it well. And so if we should get upset when we reach those points, either him or me, so the idea is we go through these things here and then get calmed down, and then we go back to the issue and talk about it again. Is that?
One of the things you can do is you don't have to deal with everything right now. And it's okay to say, this is a problem, I will deal with this on Friday. Give yourself a time and a date, and basically kind of hold yourself to it, but give yourself a break so you can process, but you don't put it off forever. We even do that with with marital couples when there's a fight. You know, you stop the fight, you go separate ways, and you calm yourself down, but you always set a time that you've got to come back, and then that's when you'll deal with it and actually address the issue. And this is the kind of thing that you've got to break this down into little pieces to deal with it. And you can have a plan, but work at, okay, what do we expect first? And how are we going to deal with that? And then don't try to deal with, oh my God, the whole world's going to fall apart, because that just gets overwhelming. You've got to do it little pieces at a time to be successful. And that's a therapist coming out in me.
Yes, please.
So, my wife has been struggling to walk. She used to walk 3 miles, no problem, a couple years ago. She has a aide, they go to the Bronx Zoo, or the Bronx Zoo, man, you can tell I'm from New York. Go to the Atlanta Zoo, go to the Botanical Gardens, whatever it might be. And so it was becoming difficult for her, and then she was avoiding it. So I got a wheelchair, and just sort of respected the fact that she wanted to walk. And so we just sort of didn't force it on her, and just sort of let her come to her own conclusion. And it's respect. So I respect her choices. We talk about it. I don't say you have to do it. And then she respects the fact that I care for her, and we're doing this because we care for her. Wouldn't it be nice to go to the gardens? Wouldn't it be nice to go to the zoo? Wouldn't it be nice to go to the Piedmont Park and be able to enjoy it more and just be pushed around? Or last year we flew to Boston. We walked through the airport to go to the sea terminal. That was hard for her. I said afterwards, wouldn't it be better next year when we go that maybe you get a wheelchair? She goes, yeah, I probably can use a wheelchair now. So it's just iterative. And it's just about respect, and it's not avoiding it and just talking calmly about it, but it's really hard. And you can't blame yourself for anything. That's my experience.
Let's see, so one of my biggest issues in transition, sorry, if I've knocked something over, I apologize. Let's see, so I lost my job when I was working for a high-paying company, and I was highly embarrassed by it, and I didn't know it at the time what it was. I just knew I thought I was stressed out. I was comfortable in my high-paying job. It was for a petroleum company, and I was an engineer and did lots of important stuff. And for many, many years, I was a highly paid, highly rewarded, and got bonuses and did well. Sorry. I was also, not to brag, but so I was valedictorian in my high school. And I did well at college, and so I got a master's degree. And so I'm saying all these things to compare you to where I am now, which part of me still hates what I've turned into, and I know that's not true, but I hate myself for it, and it's there. And not having that job is, I miss having what I thought was a tangible, job to keep me busy and doing, contributing to stuff. Anyhow, and so when I met her, so that was actually, we were divorced. She was divorced. Well, I was just getting divorced. I was recently divorced when we met and we started dating. And after dating for about 3 years, that's when I lost my job. And so, and I was max humiliated, but she didn't care. Yeah, she was very, the most compassionate person I've ever met. And so instead of leaving me, we got married. And so I lucked out. And so some of y'all may have heard the story already, but I could tell it all day long, and I'm good. Thanks.
I want to tag on some of that stuff. With the wheelchair, Nathan did not want to do a wheelchair at first, but then he realized that it was easier on him and it was easier on me. And so we went that route, and we just eased into it. There was no force. That was on his timetable, what he wanted to do. We had a big trip coming, and I had suggested, hey, look, we've got this trip coming. don't you think it might be easier to use this wheelchair? Doesn't mean you have to live in it. It's just, you know, because at that point his gait had started getting considerably worse. Talking about the driving, Nathan voluntarily gave up his driving, and he hated it, but he did it, you know, again, no force. He had actually had an accident. He went to merge into the right-hand lane while a log truck was trying to merge into the left-hand lane, and they collided. And that's when he decided that, I mean, thankfully no one was hurt except the car. Yeah, it got hurt a little bit, but and so did our pocketbook. But no, he decided that, you know, that might be for the best. And you have to, you know, you really have to make those decisions for yourself. You know, and thankfully he realized that that was a dangerous situation for him to, you know, he got lucky. So after that, he gave up the driver's license. You know, it sucks. It really does. I probably shouldn't use that word, especially since we're a room full of people and online. But HD sucks. But, you know, you have to find a way that's good for you to get by. And it's a day-by-day, second-by-second process. I mean, you know, that especially for the I call you guys warriors. Those of you who are dealing with HD and suffering from it and are positive, you guys are warriors in my book. And you know, each warrior has to try to make that decision for him and herself. And you know, us caregivers, don't think I don't cuss and fuss, because I do. And then I'm profusely apologizing. Yeah. You know, when Nathan at 3 o'clock in the morning wakes me up and says, "Hey, I need you to help me go to the bathroom." Oh, dang it, Nathan, I just laid down from the last time. Okay, I'm sorry. But you just have to learn how to cope what's best for you. That's what we did. That's what, you know, and it was a long, hard road. I mean, we got diagnosed. I say we a lot too, by the way. I never even mentioned the story in here, so thank you for telling my story some. Nathan got diagnosed April 15th of 2016, and so we've been dealing with Huntington's, and he actually dealt with it before because his mom had Huntington's, and she actually went into a nursing home when he was about 4 or 5, but she did not recognize, she was in severe denial. And what ended up making her go, like, for example, my sister-in-law was born at home in a rare Louisiana snowstorm because their mom didn't realize that she was in labor. And not long after that, they had to put their mom in a nursing home. And before that, their mom was cooking dinner and forgot she was cooking and burned the house down. And I mean, met Nathan and his brother getting off the school bus with a shotgun because she didn't know who they were. So when Nathan got diagnosed, the first thing I said to him when he got back, okay, my son ate a Tide Pod the night before Nathan got his diagnosis. I was in the hospital with him. Nathan and his sister were across the street. So when Nathan got back to the hospital room, the first thing I said to him was that your walk with Huntington's will not be your mom's. My walk with Huntington's will not be your dad's. And we have made a very concentrated effort to make that happen. And part of that is that Nathan has made an effort to try to recognize when, if he's not thinking, like he puts it, if I'm not thinking right, tell me. And, you know, we go that route. I'm totally getting off subject, but yeah, you said you wanted us to talk, so we're talking. But, you know, with him, it just, he hates that he has lost the independence, but we have compensated in other areas. Adaptive clothing. We love gadgets. Like I said earlier, we love gadgets. So we will get gadgets that will help in his everyday life to make him more not independent rather than dependent. If me paying $8 for a pack of little plastic things that are moon-shaped that he sticks his hamburger in and he can eat that hamburger on his own without dumping it everywhere and feeling horrible that he's ruined his shirt or something like that, I will pay $8 all day long. I will buy whatever gadget it takes to help him feel independent. And, that's a big thing for our warriors. They want to be independent. And we get that. And those caregivers want to try to make that happen as best as possible. And I'll let Karen talk some now.
Well, first of all, I have Huntington's, so I have Huntington's. But caregivers have a choice to be here or not to be here. I mean, they could walk out on it. So I try to remember that and know that I need them. So I have to love them and not be so mean sometimes to people.
God forbid they touch your windshield, though, right?
Yeah, windshields. But I mean, thank you, because caregivers, I mean, you guys chose to be with us. I mean, I'm sick, so that's good. And I know a lot of people have lost their husband and wives and family because they don't want to deal with it. And so it's hard, so thank you. All right, so I worked at FedEx, so I was a driver. And my mom, that was a long time ago. I knew that the Huntingtons, and driving and the whatnot. And so I was always afraid. It's like, holy cow, I drive for FedEx and I don't want to hurt anybody. So it worked out that I decided to get off the road being a driver before I had my symptoms for Huntington's. A lot of my symptoms, like 17 years ago. Then I went in the office because I didn't want to be a driver that did things. At my support group, there was a nurse, and nurses, you would think a nurse knows about Huntington's that she had, but when she had said to me, I didn't remember if that light was red or green, and she drove herself to the support group meeting. I went, holy cow, okay, I have to rethink how long I want to drive for my job or even just drive because there are things going on in my body that I am not totally aware of. And now, I'm not going to get one of those new cars that drives itself because that's even worse because, you need to really look around your car to make sure instead of those. So, but also we have now Uber. If we want to get somewhere, we can get there on our own and not use our car. And I'm going to do that. Or bike.
You can continue now if you like.
I don't want to say anything because this is like a seminar in the nuts and bolts of how to deal with stuff. All I'm doing is putting labels on some of the stuff you guys are living through. So keep talking.
Okay.
And the audience as well. Some of the stuff you guys have offered and shared has just been incredible.
Anybody on the app?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
all good.
Okay.
And I haven't made you cry yet, so.
No, not yet. It's coming, I'm sure.
This Fitbit has a thing that helps you breathe.
What?
Yeah, it has a thing for 2 minutes to help you breathe.
Really?
Yeah.
Like a meditation.
Yeah, so I tried to do that, and I lost like 20 seconds.
All right, my thing is sometimes it's easy to get frustrated and it's easy to get angry, but like her, I gotta constantly put myself in check and think how I would feel if I were him.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. One thing that really stands out for me as far as our journey with Huntington's. Now I'm going to cry on my own. You didn't do it this time. Nathan constantly tells me, it's Karen's fault. She did the whole sweet thing. How Nathan always makes a point to tell me how much he loves me and thanks me so much for staying. talking about choice.
Yeah.
And Mahal heard about this earlier. The week before we got married, my boss pulls me aside and goes, "Look, are you getting married for the right reasons? Is this the one, or are you just afraid you're going to be an old maid?" I was 38, 39 when I got married. I'm still working on the first marriage. The next one's going to be for money. But anyhow, yeah.
Dark humor.
Yeah, dark humor, got to go there. But just knowing how he is appreciative and he realizes, even though he despises the fact he has lost his independence, he despises the fact that sometimes we have to go, "What'd you say?" Because his voice, is not what it was. And I wish I had more recordings of his normal voice. But we're rectifying that, trying to anyway. But, it's just one of those things that he makes a point to, where I make a point to put myself in his place. He does the same. And it's amazing how he realizes and how aware that even though you don't think that they're aware, because Nathan's considered more of a mid going on to late stage, I guess. And I don't know, is TFC, is that right?
CAG?
No, I know it's CAG, it's 46. I'm looking at the, that total functional capacity, is that it?
Totally right.
Yeah. I don't know what that number is now. Okay. Hey, I don't feel so bad now. Your shirt literally says Huntington sucks.
It does.
It does. But anyhow, while it sucks for us as caregivers to have to watch what our warriors go through, it sucks even more for you guys. And there are no words to express how highly we think of you guys and what you have to go through in your daily walk, because we see it and we know it's hard. And I'm going to put you on the spot after that.
Okay. I don't have anything to say right this second.
Oh, well, you can hold on to that.
Oh, I'll hold on. That's mine. I was going to say something. I got to remember what I was going to say.
When it comes up, don't hesitate
I'll
to
just-
just jump right in there. Other comments, questions from you guys, comments? Stuff we've not addressed that you wanted to be sure to get addressed?
I'm talking to myself.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Hold on. Don't put fingerprints on it.
One of the things that this workshop was to do is to talk about caretaker roles and how we cope with that and how they change. And y'all have given us very good examples from beginning to end, that the caregiver role is so imperative, but it changes every day. Every hour, sometimes every 5 minutes, and sometimes every minute. But we appreciate y'all being able to share how that has affected you and how you cope with it.
It's an excellent point.
Have you read the caregiver book that HCSA has? All the books. You got to read all the books, but they have a book on caregiving, and it does help.
Have her say that on the mic.
Say it on the mic.
Hello. So HCSA, ever since I've been looking at their booklets, and they update them and they keep them up to date, and they're the amazing bit of information. That's how I trained the doctors when my mom was sick. But they have one for caregivers, and they have one for second half of being sick and swallowing and everything. And you need to read those because, I have Huntington's, but I'm also a caregiver for my sisters and, with other family members. So I have a dual role, and I'm always reading that going, I didn't realize that. I learned something new. I'm always learning new things every day that I can use to help me caregive for my sisters.
HDSA.org, publications.
Or you can get a free copy up there. Yeah, HDSA is amazing. I mean, and they really take the time to make those booklets the best. Do you have them?
Yeah.
This gentleman,
If you haven't seen this, oh, sorry. Thank you. Protocol. That's better. Better. Oh, there's a movie that's y'all may have seen called Huntington's Dance by Chris Furby. So it's I know it's not on their website necessarily, but if you haven't, I recommend looking it up. So that's it. Thank you.
All of them. Oh, I'm in one too.
Oh, cool.
We saw you.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right, we did. Yeah.
When I didn't have a belly.
We just
Yeah,
saw
we
you
did.
and we were like, oh, look, that's her.
Yeah.
Todd, go ahead.
Well, yeah, there's another great caregiver, Kathy, my friend that's in that movie. I mean, I have never seen her ever complain. I mean, she filmed that movie with her family in it, and then one of her siblings didn't want to be in the movie. And if it was my family, I would have been mad. She never said a word ever. I mean, and because caregivers, just try to just deal with what they can, and everything else, she says, well, he doesn't want to be in it, so I have to let him be that way. But so thank you.
No, I was just going to mention, I don't know if you guys have noticed a lot lately about how Huntington's is starting to make its way into the mainstream of TV shows and stuff like that, like Call the Midwife is one, Chicago Med, but I wasn't happy with how they handled Huntington's on it. But Walker, the new version of Walker, Texas Ranger, but then again, I think that has to do with Scott Porter and his influence in that area, in that world. But talking about that movie, that kind of made me think of all this other. I mean, if Huntington's hadn't stepped in the way, I'd be an actor. So that kind of stands out. But I'm really glad to see that we're getting that kind of an awareness. And totally off topic here, but if we can continue getting that kind of awareness, that would be amazing.
just one thought on top of the idea about for caregivers and the job they do. It's really important, and you've mentioned some of this already, that you do things to take care of yourself in the process, because otherwise there are costs that you pay for that, even although you're very well-intentioned is not the right word, dedicated to what you're doing. You have to take care of yourself sometime and carve out that time so you're at your best in dealing with your loved one. You know that, I'm sure. Do you mind sharing what, and anybody else, what stuff you do?
Well, they have respite, so that is good. I mean, you can put your person in a home for a day or two. If, like my friend who came here, she put her son in respite because he can't take, the house would be on fire. That's true. I mean, and I keep my house on fire too. I mean, we're not very good at remembering to turn off things. But, okay, I can't remember.
Does screaming, cussing, and crying count? I do that.
Yes.
No, seriously, sometimes I joke and say sometimes I work harder at home than I do at work, but I also have a 7-year-old at home too. So, but just trying to spend time, quality time, is really my thing. I want to have that quality time with Nathan and our son and our stepdaughter when she comes in. She's a teenager. She's almost 17. She's got, fluttering here, there, and yon, and has the driver's license, so when she comes. But I really, as far as stuff for myself, if I can do it, I do theater. If I can do it, I'll, audition for stuff. That's my outlet. As well as just, writing and eventually one day I wouldn't mind doing some kind of writing or documentary type, because that's just my thing. I'm film. But mostly it's just trying to get as much quality time with Nathan and our son Hayden as I can. And please don't touch Karen's windows.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's a funny, that's okay. Hey, Dart, yeah. Yeah. Do you guys know what respite is? I mean, that, okay, good.
So I'm curious, because I don't have are there questions coming through the app or?
I'm checking.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Someone is saying that, forgot my role. So someone just commented that Hope for the Caregiver is a great book by Peter Rosenberger. So there's another recommendation. But that's all we have on the app.
And Jim Pollard, you need to read his books too.
Jim Pollard, and he's around, right? I think I saw him.
Yeah, but he used to work at, I'm not sure what his job was there, but when my mom was sick, I found his name that he worked at the nursing home called Lowell, which was pretty well known years ago for the only place that was taking Huntington's patients. So I called him, and he gave me a lot of information. But when you read, I'm not sure what the name of it is, but the book truly helps us learn how to talk to our person with Huntington's a lot better. You can't say, what do you want to eat tonight? You got to say, do you want hot dog or fish? Everything has to be simpler. And then he was saying how, it's an amazing story, how he wasn't getting anybody to smile at him in the home. Nobody was looking at him. He just felt like they hated him. But it was because he was not communicating the right way that they could understand what they were saying. And after he did that, they were having total good conversations.
And the book is called Hurry Up and Wait.
Yes, thank you.
Helping while wait. Yeah.
Hurry up and wait. Yes.
That sounds like the film industry. Well, and talking about that, something we were talking about in our support group in Mississippi not long ago was some of our warriors were explaining how, what they need and how they need, like if they're going somewhere, they need time and reminders and that kind of thing. Now, in our case, we just did our walk, and I don't know if I ever told you about this, but Nathan kept calling it a wheelchair race. When's our wheelchair race again? When are we meeting our friends? Talking about the support group, but just our friend that I'm trying hard to refrain from using real names here, but she was explaining in support group that something that they need is to give them time. And you mentioning hurry up and wait made that pop in my mind about needing time to get their mindset in that they're going somewhere, or if they have routine. Huh?
We have to have routine.
You see, we don't. Nathan's so laid back, it's just whatever he wants to do, but.
You sure you're done? Yeah. Well, I need routine. Yeah, I have to have things in a certain way and whatnot. And there is called apathy, and we are going to stop wanting to do something. And it's not that we're even depressed. It's just something in our brain is making us just want to sit at home and not go anywhere. And I'm afraid that, because I love doing things, but one day I'm going to be like that, and it's scary. But it's going to be hard for the caregivers to say, okay, just sit there and watch TV. I'm okay with it. You guys are going to have to learn how to focus with that. And my mom, she only wanted to go to the same place she always went. To feed the ducks, from the nursing home, and then go right back, because that was her constant, and she was sure and firm with that, and she didn't want to go anywhere else. If we took her any place else, she was sitting on the middle of the road, having a tantrum. So, I mean, and that's not fun. I mean, I thought I was doing, helping her, wanting her to have fun, but it wasn't fun for her.
We'll let you have it back now.
Okay. Are there, we're in the question and kind of wrapping things up stage. Are there questions from anyone or additional comments you'd like to share?
Does everybody go to a support group? Good. Because they help a lot.
You mean the ones here
Well,
during the convention or on a regular
After,
basis?
yeah. Having a support group is because then you're sitting in a room with other people with Huntington's, and they will help you focus, on things that they are having problems with too. So you get great information other than the books. But the support groups are great, and we have them on Zoom. I've been on a couple. Even for my Florida one, I'm on Zoom. And it's good information. I mean, every time you hear somebody talk, you learn something.
There are none in our area. How do you find the ones on Zoom?
I will repeat your comment. There are none in our area. How do you find the ones on Zoom? So there's a couple of different options. One is to contact HDSA. I happen to work for HDSA, so if anyone needs my contact information. There's a few that are still virtual. There's some that are going hybrid, so that you can join them in person or virtual. There is a free support service that you can get through HDSA now, which I forget the name of it, but I can get you that information. So it's not a support group, it's more of a therapy social worker or someone that you can call.
That's
Amwell, thank you. So there's different options. Specifically, you guys are in Texas, so I can connect you also with a regional social worker who happens to be in Texas, and she can definitely connect you with.
Miami has one, and so does Orlando.
Yeah, there's plenty.
From your house.
And then for those who are listening, again, virtually, if you don't know where to go, go on the HDSA website. A lot of the information is on there. And definitely contact the list of the regional development officers is on the website as well, and you can contact the person, the one that's in your region. So I happen to be in the South region, but we have services all across the country.
And Jim Pollard has a meeting every Friday.
Apparently Jim Pollard has a meeting every Friday. Thank you. Last words. Final words.
You're not getting the final word?
I mean,
I was letting you go
Oh. That's been polite.
So what we see here is that Karen has to have the last word. Don't touch her windows, and she has to have the last word. I'm joking.
It feels good to say it.
Really, as far as final words, just, processing in your own time frame. You can't rush it for yourself. You can't rush it for anyone else. You just have to take your time in doing. My sister-in-law likes to go, you do you. And so this is one of those cases if you have to do you. And, HD sucks. It really does. And it sucks being the caregiver, watching your warrior go through hell. Pardon the language. I hope HDSA will let me come back or whatever after the language I've used. I have said worse, though. But,
We've got a few minutes if you want to.
well, it's not 3 o'clock in the morning and I have to help Nathan get out of the bed. No, I'm joking. But no, just you have to take things at your own pace. It sucks that the independence is going, but in place of that is you find out that your caregiver really does care, and that your caregiver, most caregivers, yeah, you hear the bad stories. That's not everybody, you know, and that we're there because we want to be there, because we love and care about our warriors.
But you lose all your intimacy too and all that. That sucks. I said suck again. I'm going to say one thing. Talk to your person. The caregivers need to talk to us now while we can still communicate and our brain is still better to make those decisions on a feeding tube. Do we want to be in a nursing home? You know, you don't want to wait until they're sick, because then how do you know that's really what they wanted to say? It's better to ask when they were 6 years old versus, you know, wait, because, I mean, I don't want a feeding tube. And my sister, we've always had that talk, and I had said I was going to be like Dr. Death, you know, and go put a pillow over their face, you know. But my sister's in the nursing home now, and I can still say to her, even though she can't talk, are you sure you don't want that feeding tube? No feeding tube. I mean, and so I am happy knowing that we have made this, all of this, we made that. And, you know, she already has her wills and everything made out. Wow, you can talk. And who you want to give stuff to, you got to have that talk. I mean, it's kind of scary. Nobody wants to put their wills together, and they wait, you know, until you're 90. You know, when my other sister, she passed away at 50, and her husband, so she was real sick in the hospital, and I said, well, what are you guys doing? What plans did you guys make? His answer was, well, it's up to God. And God's going to decide if you want a cemetery or, you know, cremate her or bury her. I mean, well, his family's kind of strange. But, I mean, you have to have that talk.
Back to you.
All I'm going to say, and I really don't deserve the last word, so if I say this and you guys want to jump in for the final last word, if you're the individual who has HD, or if you're the caregiver, part of what you have to be thinking about is how I'm going to take care of myself during the process of dealing with all this horrible stuff I'm dealing with, and what works for one person doesn't work for another person, and what works for you one day may not work for you the next day. So it's a constant kind of moving target to figure out, how do I take care of myself, and but that has to be part of your mindset to get through something like this.
That's good final word. Yes.
Fantastic.
Amen.
And therapy is available for people who don't like people touching their windshields. I'll just say that.
They have Zoom meetings for that.
It doesn't work. I fall asleep.
Thank you very much.